Hello everyone, welcome back to Hit the Apex. I'm Charlie and today we have another video. This time we are reviewing round 11 of the 2023 season where we were at Silverstone, at the Silverstone Circuit for the 2023 British Grand Prix. Before we get going, make sure to like, share and subscribe to the channel if you are new around here. Dugout Daily, the football channel, Hit the Apex, the F1 channel, and at MCFC Hibs on Twitter. We will get going then, and we will start with practice 1. Of course, it was normal sessions of practice 1, practice 2 and practice 3 with qualifying and the race. So Verstappen led Perez and Albon as British Grand Prix weekend begins. Max Verstappen set the pace during first practice for the British Grand Prix, topping the timesheets from Red Bull teammate Sergio Perez and the high-flying Williams of Alex Albon as Friday's track action kicked off. After a rain-hit weekend in Austria, it was a glorious start to proceedings at the historic Silverstone Circuit, with clear blue skies covering a track lined with grandstands and grass banks full of passionate fans. It was a particularly busy hour of running for the drivers and teams as they not only got back up to speed with a fast-flowing layout after a year away, but also sampled Pirelli's new tyre construction for all dry compounds, which is aimed at increasing the product's strength. As the various runs played out on the hard, medium and soft tyres, it was reigning double world champion Verstappen who came out on top, working his way down to a time of 1 minute 28.6 seconds on the red marked rubber. After stopping his three-race run without a podium finish last time out at the Red Bull Ring, Perez backed up teammate Verstappen to give the Milton Keynes outfit a 1-2 result, albeit finishing some half a second adrift. While Red Bull's upgrades are relatively limited for this weekend, and Ferrari have not reported any changes, a host of rivals, including Mercedes and Aston Martin, rolled out bigger packages as the push to catch the reigning world champion continues. Williams, sporting more new parts of their own, started their weekend in fine style with a run to third position. Alex Albon displaying impressive straight-line speed to slot ahead of Fernando Alonso's Aston Martin and Charles Leclerc's Ferrari. Alpine also showed some encouraging early pace, with Esteban Ocon ending up between Leclerc and the other Ferrari of Carlos Sainz, while Lando Norris kept McLaren in the top 10 mix after his strong Austria showing. Aston Martin's Lance Stroll and McLaren's Oscar Piastri, also running the upgrades. Norris debuted at the last Grand Prix, rounding out the top 10 positions, which did not feature Mercedes after they opted against any soft tyre runs. However, there were issues for Piastri at the tail end, as McLaren reported a hydraulic leak on his chrome-liveried MCL60. Lewis Hamilton took 12th after his runs on medium and hard tyres, just behind the lead AlphaTauri of Nick de Vries, who had an early spin at Love Field, with George Russell back in 14th behind the other Alpine of Pierre Gasly. Valtteri Bottas put his Alfa Romeo 15 from Yuki Tsunoda and Logan Sargent in the second of the AlphaTauri and Williams machines, as teammates Zhou Guanyu and the Haas cars of Kevin Magnussen and Nico Hülkenberg brought up the rear. F1 drivers and teams will now regroup in the paddock and analyse the data from first practice before Friday's second session gets underway at 4 p.m. local time. So we will move to practice 2 then, where Verstappen topped second practice at Silverstone from Sainz and Albon as Leclerc hits trouble. Max Verstappen completed a Friday practice clean sweep by setting the pace during FP2 for the British Grand Prix, putting his Red Bull just in front of Carlos Sainz's Ferrari and the rapid Williams of Alex Albon, while Charles Leclerc failed to make it out on track amid technical problems. After an incident-packed F2 qualifying, the start of the session was delayed by 5 minutes to accommodate barrier repairs and track sweeping, but the full 60 minutes of running was still available to the field, bar the sideline Leclerc, as they wrapped up further valuable data for the remainder of the weekend. It was 2022 pole sitter and race winner Sainz who set the early pace on medium tyres, only for reigning double world champion Verstappen to reclaim top spot when drivers moved over to softs as the halfway mark of the session approached. Verstappen finished up with a best time of 1 minute 28.078 seconds, more than half a second quicker than his FP1 benchmark, but Sainz sat just 0.022 seconds adrift, with Albon and Williams continuing to impress via a run to third on the timesheets. Sergio Perez wound up fourth, a quarter of a second away from teammate Verstappen, while rookie Logan Sargent underlined Williams' strong start to the weekend by posting a lap time quick enough to round out the top five. With their factory just a few hundred metres from the circuit, Aston Martin ended their day in 6th and 10th respectively, Lance Stroll leading the team's charge over Fernando Alonso, albeit with the Canadian losing a mirror and taking a stone to the finger, and the Spaniard losing one of his runs to an issue at the front left of his car. Nico Hulkenberg went from 20th and last in FP1 to 7th in FP2, with the Alpine of Pierre Gasly and McLaren of Oscar Piastri slotting between the Haas driver and the aforementioned Alonso to complete the top half of the field. Mercedes had another quiet session despite this time running soft tyres, as George Russell took 12th just behind Alfa Romeo's Zhou Guanyu, and Lewis Hamilton placed 15th, having run wide and launched over the curbs, exiting Stowe. Esteban Ocon and Lando Norris were 13th and 14th in their respective Alpine and McLarens, as Valtteri Bottas in the Alfa Romeo, Kevin Magnussen in the Haas, and the Alfa Tauris of Yuki Tsunoda and Nick de Vries brought up the rear ahead of Leclerc. De Vries enduring a scary moment after the checkered flag had flown after he suffered a sudden front right puncture on his Alfa Tauri. Ferrari mechanics were huddled around Leclerc's car in the early minutes of the session as they attempted to repair an electrical issue, but the crew were unable to complete a fix in time and instead turned their attention to Saturday's running. After the first two practice sessions, drivers and teams will now study the data and get ready for another busy schedule tomorrow, with third and final practice scheduled for 11:30 a.m. local time, followed by qualifying at 3 p.m. So we will move to practice 3 then, where Leclerc heads Albon and Alonso in FP3 at Silverstone as rain arrives. Charles Leclerc bounced back from his second practice woes to set the pace during Saturday's third session at the Silverstone Circuit, leading the way from the ever-impressive Williams of Alex Albon and Fernando Alonso's Aston Martin before a mid-session shower. Following a warm and dry opening day at the historic venue, wet conditions greeted the drivers as they returned to the track ahead of the FP3 hour, with temperatures dropping overnight and dark clouds hovering above. While the preceding F3 race took place in the wet, a break in the weather saw the track dry up sufficiently for slick tyres when F1 cars headed out, albeit with a 90% risk of further showers throughout the session. Some 25 minutes in, the heavens duly opened again, putting an end to teams' respective qualifying-style runs and effectively freezing the timesheets, with Red Bull the only team not to have made the move to the soft compound tyre. It meant reigning double world champion Max Verstappen, who topped FP1 and FP2, finished back in 8th position, while teammate Sergio Perez down in 14th, though they had still gathered valuable data in the slippery intermediate conditions that followed. In the Red Bull driver's absence from the sharp end, it was Leclerc who posted the session's benchmark with a 1 minute 27.419 second lap on the red-marked rubber, making up some of the mileage he lost after being sidelined by an electrical problem during second practice, adding the flourish of a spin after the checkered flag at club corner for good measure. Albon and Williams continued to impress with a run to P2, brushing off an electrical glitch to finish just 0.173 seconds down on Leclerc, with Alonso another to get a soft shod lap in just before the rain hit as he pipped Pierre Gasly's Alpine and Lewis Hamilton's Mercedes, which began to show some more pace. Carlos Sainz had led the early stages of the session but fell down to 6th after a flurry of improvements, with Logan Sargent an encouraging 7th in the other Williams despite crazy hot air in the cockpit after something blew off his car, followed by the aforementioned Verstappen. George Russell was ninth in the second of the Mercedes, just in front of AlphaTauri pair Yuki Tsunoda and Nick de Vries, with Lando Norris 12th after an early incident that saw him stop at the end of the pit lane and then get helped on his way by a mechanic. The steward set to investigate post-session. Lance Stroll completed a lap on softs just as the conditions were moving from dry to wet, leaving him 13th in his Aston Martin ahead of Perez, the lead Haas of Kevin Magnussen, Esteban Ocon's Alpine and Oscar Piastri's McLaren. Alfa Romeo sat out the early stages of the session, meaning they missed the best of the weather conditions, but while Valtteri Bottas eventually emerged to complete a solid number of laps, teammate Zhou Guanyu was stuck in the pits amid apparent technical issues. That left the Finn 18th and the Chinese racer at the foot of the order in 20th with a Haas and Nico Hülkenberg, who, like Verstappen and Perez, did not get a representative time on softs slotting between them. Drivers will now take a break before preparing for the all-important qualifying session at 3 p.m. local time, with further mixed conditions expected. So we will move to qualifying then, where Verstappen beats Norris to pole in thrilling wet-dry qualifying at Silverstone. Red Bull driver Max Verstappen made it 5 pole positions in a row and 7 for the 2023 season so far during Saturday's action-packed wet-to-dry qualifying session at the Silverstone Circuit, beating McLaren pair Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri to the top spot. Verstappen overcame the changeable conditions and a moment in the pit lane that saw him damage his front wing to emerge with the landmark pole, finishing 2 times clear of fired-up home favourite Norris and a further 10th up on Piastri. Ferrari and Mercedes followed line Aston in positions 4 to 7, with Charles Leclerc edging out Carlos Sainz and George Russell getting the better of Lewis Hamilton, who survived a huge spin at the beginning of qualifying. After flirting with a Q1 exit on a slippery track, Alex Albon converted his and Williams' strong practice pace as the session developed, emerging with P8 ahead of Aston Martin driver Fernando Alonso and the Alpine of Pierre Gasly. Nico Hülkenberg ended qualifying as the fastest of the Haas drivers in 11th in front of Lance Stroll and Esteban Ocon, who were unable to make it to Aston Martins and Alpines in the top 10 shootout after getting in each other's way at the end of Q2. Williams rookie Logan Sargent had several lap times deleted en route to 14th, meaning he also had to watch on as teammate Albon starred, with Valtteri Bottas making it through to the second phase but unable to contest it due to his Alfa Romeo stopping on track in Q1. After a Q1 exit in Monaco and Q2 exits in Spain, Canada and Austria, the other Red Bull, Sergio Perez, could not make it beyond the first qualifying segment, missing the cut by 200ths of a second in the tricky conditions. AlphaTauri pair Yuki Tsunoda and Nick de Vries also fell at the first hurdle in 17th and 19th respectively, sandwiching the other Alfa Romeo of Zhou Guanyu, who will be investigated post-session after appearing to get in the way of Ocon at the high-speed Maggots and Beckett's complex. Kevin Magnussen brought up the rear in 20th, the Haas driver having lost power and come to a halt at the exit of Stowe in a moment that brought out the red flags and led to a host of improvements when the action resumed. So as it happened then, in Q1, Norris dances in the rain as Perez hits trouble again. After a rain-hit final practice session, the inclement conditions continued in the build-up to qualifying as more showers fell and produced a wet F2 race. But another break in the weather meant the track was only damp for the start of Q1. With more rain in the air, drivers were quick to head out and get some laps in when the first phase began, bringing an intriguing mixture of tyre choices as the Ferrari drivers Haas cars and Williams rookie Sargent went for intermediates, while the rest of the field went for soft slicks. Leclerc immediately called for a switch to dry tyres and the quintet returned to the pits to bolt on softs, though Hamilton showed how precarious the conditions still were with a wild slide and spin into the gravel at Stowe, the 7-time world champion managing to recover and continue. A flurry of lap times followed, with Alonso and Stroll briefly forming an Aston Martin 1-2 after Verstappen's first effort was deleted over track limits, only for the Dutchman to pump in another and split the green machines, just as reports of more rain came in. Alonso and Verstappen continued to trade fastest times over the next few minutes, with a Red Bull man clocking a 1 minute 30.719 second lap to sit 0.011 seconds clear, as Leclerc held third from Russell and Ocon. At the other end of the order, Magnussen, Zhou, Sargent, Bottas and Albon, who lost their time over track limits, were in the drop zone. It's raining everywhere at the moment, came the next weather update from Russell as replay showed Sargent taking a trip through the gravel, Ocon almost running into a slow-moving Zhou at Maggots, and De Vries being released into the path of Piastri in the pit lane, the latter two incidents to be looked at after the session. Moments later, the red flags were thrown when Magnussen came to a halt at the exit of Stowe. This meant a 3-minute shootout when the session resumed amid further drops of rain, with Verstappen needing a new front wing for his final run after clipping the pit wall. At the end of another frantic spell with improvements coming left, right and centre, it was an inspired Norris who led the way on a 1 minute 28.917 second lap, ahead of Leclerc, Russell, Hamilton and Verstappen, with Stroll, Albon, Gasly, Hülkenberg and Ocon also getting into the top 10. Bottas brought out the yellow flags after the checkered flag by stopping in the middle sector with no power, meaning he would not be able to take part in Q2, despite making it through in 11th, followed by Sainz, Sargent, Piastri and Alonso, who squeezed through by just a couple of hundredths. Alonso's progression came at the expense of Perez, who endured yet another early qualifying bath, having now failed to reach Q3 for 5 races in a row, with Tsunoda, Zhou, De Vries, with Tsunoda, Zhou, De Vries and Magnussen joining him on the sidelines. So knocked out in Q1 was Perez, Tsunoda, Zhou, De Vries and Magnussen. In Q2 then, Verstappen was fastest from the McLarens and Albon. When Q2 got underway, with the sun breaking through the clouds, drivers were told that no more rain was on the way. All 14 of them, minus Bottas, going for more soft tyres as they looked to book a spot in the pole position shootout. Norris continued where he left off in Q1 with an early Q2 benchmark of 1 minute 29.427 seconds, leading Gasly by just under half a tenth, with Verstappen, Piastri, Sainz and Ocon also in the mix as the sun lit up the track after and the clear dry line emerged. A host of drivers spent phases in P1 in the minutes that followed, with Norris lowering the target again to a 1 minute 28.042 second lap, leading Hamilton, teammate Piastri and Verstappen by half a second. Meanwhile, Sargent lost 2 lap times over track limits and Stroll lost one of his own, leaving them in the drop zone alongside Ocon, Hülkenberg and the sideline Bottas. When the clock stopped, it was Verstappen who held the quickest time on a 1 minute 27.702 second lap, as he and Red Bull began to show their hands, followed by the high-flying McLarens and Williams machines of Norris, who had a lap time deleted Piastri and Albon respectively, with the Ferrari drivers, Mercedes drivers, Alonso's Aston Martin and Gasly's Alpine the others to make it through to Q3. Hülkenberg's qualifying session ended in 11th, with Stroll and Ocon winding up 12th and 13th after replay showed them squabbling over track position. Sargent could not replicate teammate Albon's pace as he took 14th, having lost those earlier laps over track limits, with Bottas rounding out the Q2 order. So knocked out in Q2 was Hülkenberg, Stroll, Ocon, Sargent and Bottas. And in Q3, Norris comes close, but pole goes to Verstappen. With 2 fresh sets of softs at his disposal, Verstappen laid down the early Q3 marker on a 1 minute 27.084 second lap, a whopping 6 tenths up on nearest rival Hamilton, followed by Piastri, the Ferraris of Leclerc and Sainz, Alonso, Albon and Gasly, as Russell and Norris held 9th and 10th. After a brief spell in the pits, the entire field emerged on new rubber and delivered one more exciting spell of lap time improvements. The track surface as dry as it had been and the temperatures as high as they had been since the start of qualifying an hour earlier. Norris sparked roars in the grandstands and on the grass banks that lined the circuit by clocking a 1 minute 26.961 second lap to grab provisional pole and threaten a first P1 start since Russia in 2021, but Verstappen was also improving and took it back with his 1 minute 26.72 second lap. P2 nonetheless marked a superb return for Mclaren and their upgraded MCL 60s, with Piastri joining the party to take third ahead of the Ferraris of Leclerc and Sainz and the Mercedes car of Russell and Hamilton. While it was not another top three, having been inside that bracket in FP1, FP2 and FP3, Albon and Williams secured a fine 8th for Sunday's race, with Alonso and Gasly completing the top 10 on the grid. Well, Verstappen said after qualifying, it's been quite a crazy qualifying. It's been quite hectic, also quite slippery in some places. We did our laps, and then in Q3, I was quite surprised to see Norris and Piastri there, but it's great for McLaren as well to be here. From our side, very happy, of course, to be on pole, especially Q1 and Q2. There were still a few damp spots, so you had to be a little bit careful. Of course, you push close to the limit, but knowing that we have a quick car, you don't need to go to the 100% limit. And that's why in Q3, when you really just go for it, that's where we then eked out the gap a little bit. But still, it was not a very big gap term. For us, it's a great day, and I'm looking forward to tomorrow already. So the Grand Prix then began at 3 p.m. local time on Sunday. Moving on to the race then, Verstappen heads local heroes Norris and Hamilton to claim British Grand Prix win. Red Bull's Max Verstappen overcame an early attack from McLaren rival Lando Norris to triumph in an action-packed British Grand Prix, marking his first ever victory at this event and extending his current winning rate to 6 races. Norris jumped Verstappen from the lead at the start, with teammate Oscar Piastri almost following him through, meaning it was a Red Bull in a McLaren sandwich over the first few laps, but the reigning double world champion soon fought back. By lap 5 and with DRS at his disposal, Verstappen reclaimed P1 from Norris and never looked troubled, pulling away from the home favourite as the race developed and then managing a late safety car period caused by Kevin Magnussen's smoking Haas that saw the leaders go for different tyre strategies. While the majority of the front runners chose soft tyres under the safety car, Norris went for hards, meaning he had to pull off some impressive defending to remain P2 over fellow Briton Lewis Hamilton, who jumped Piastri when the race was neutralised. Piastri had held third for the majority of the 52-lap encounter, only to pit just before the aforementioned safety car, but fourth, a couple of seconds up on the other Mercedes of George Russell, still represented the best result of the Australian rookie's burgeoning F1 career. Sergio Perez delivered another solid recovery drive to 6th after the Red Bull driver's latest qualifying woes, making a series of late moves to finish ahead of Aston Martin's Fernando Alonso, Williams' Alex Albon, and the Ferraris of Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz. Williams almost had 2 cars in the points on home soil with Logan Sargent, a personal best 11th, followed by the Alfa Romeo of Valtteri Bottas, who started at the back after being excluded from qualifying, and Nico Hülkenberg, who dropped to the rear early on when he picked up front wing damage on his Haas. Lance Stroll wound up 14th after being penalised for causing a collision with Pierre Gasly, who was forced to retire thereafter, joining teammate Esteban Ocon, who pitted early on amid apparent technical trouble, and Magnussen on the sidelines. Zhou Guanyu was 15th in the other Alfa Romeo, having made 3 pit stops, one more than anyone else, with AlphaTauri pair Yuki Tsunoda and Nick De Vries the final drivers to cross the line after Gasly's aforementioned dramas. After the checkered flag, there was no hiding Verstappen's excitement as he not only moved 99 points clear of Perez in the driver's standings, but also gave Red Bull a record equaling 11th successive F1 win. A change to the starting grid post-qualifying saw Bottas drop from 15th to 20th and last, having been excluded from the session after his Alfa Romeo stopped out on track in Q1 and the team failed to provide a sufficient fuel sample thereafter. As the drivers returned to Silverstone for race day, the rain seen in that grid-deciding session had cleared and been replaced by brighter skies, but the threat of further showers could not be counted out, while strong winds added to the challenge once again. A couple of minutes before the race start, the tyre blankets came off to reveal that most drivers had chosen medium tyres for their first stints, while Russell, Ocon, Tsunoda and De Vries chose softs and Hülkenberg and Bottas opted for hards. When the lights went out, Norris sent the home crowd wild as he bolted off the line and charged his way past Verstappen for the lead into turn one, with the Dutchman having to go defensive to keep up the other McLaren of Piastri behind over the next few corners. Behind the top three runners, Leclerc held fourth from the fellow fast-starting Russell, who made the most of his soft tyres, with Sainz, Alonso, Gasly, Hamilton having run wide and lost a place at Village, and Albon holding the final top 10 positions. Verstappen crucially stayed within a second of Norris to give him the benefit of DRS when the overtaking aid came into play on lap 2 of 52, just 5 tours in. He reclaimed P1 by tucking in behind along the Wellington Straight and diving past into Brooklands. A few cars back, Russell and Sainz went wheel to wheel through Stowe, coming perilously close to contact, while the other Mercedes of Hamilton set about overhauling Alonso for P8, repeating Verstappen's move on Norris on lap 7. When Norris and Piastri back in the positions they started, the message from the McLaren pit wall was that the Australian rookie would hold station as they looked to work together to keep Verstappen, who reported weird pulling on his car, in their sights. The first pit stop of the day went to Hülkenberg and Haas, but not for a strategic reason, with replays showing him losing a front wing end plate after the recovering Red Bull Perez muscled his way past at the loop for 13th. Heading on to lap 10, which saw Ocon pull into the pits and retire, Verstappen led Norris by little more than a second, with Piastri a similar margin back. The trio in turn putting some breathing space between themselves and the Leclerc-Russell-Sainz gaggle behind. Some mixed weather reports followed, with Verstappen being informed by his Red Bull team that rain could arrive in a couple of minutes, while Mercedes told Russell it's going to miss us on the radar, the latter expressing doubts given how dark some of the clouds were looking. With any showers holding off for the time being, Verstappen began to stretch his legs and bring his advantage over Norris up to 3 seconds, with the latter getting 2 lap times deleted for exceeding track limits and putting him at risk of a penalty. Perez's recovery drive continued at pace as he worked his way into the points by lap 17 via moves on Stroll and Albon, making the Mexican just over 20 seconds adrift of teammate and leader Verstappen, the biggest improver with 5 spots gained overall. Leclerc was the first of the front runners to pit on lap 19, swapping his mediums for a set of hards. "I saw a Ferrari pit, I guess we just stick to our strategy," Verstappen asked the Red Bull pit wall in response, to which the engineer agreed. "I'm happy it's consistent. I can maintain this for now," said Norris when asked for an update from the McLaren camp, though lap times several tenths slower than Verstappen meant the leader was now almost 5 seconds clear. Norris doubled down on those comments as the race approached the halfway mark, the majority appearing to go for a one-stop strategy, leaving Leclerc to provide the action as he worked his way back into the points on his alternate strategy. Sainz was the next front runner to pit on lap 27, moving to hards, with Russell going to mediums and Perez going to softs, stopping 2 laps later. The Mercedes coming back out just behind the aforementioned Leclerc after an issue at the front right. Then came some pit stop action from the sharp end as Piastri pitted on lap 30, moving to hards and rejoining the action in 6th between Gasly and Albon as attention turned to when teammate Norris and Verstappen would blink. Russell soon made up for his sluggish stop to clear Leclerc for P8 with a fine move at Love Field before Gasly and Stroll also took the opportunity to put on fresh tyres, Verstappen and Norris bidding their time up front as they extended their stints. With Verstappen, Norris, Hamilton, Alonso and Albon all still yet to stop, the virtual safety car was deployed when Magnussen ground to a halt in his smoking Haas on lap 33. However, only Albon was in a position to react immediately and pit. On lap 34, the full safety car was deployed with the rest of the leading group coming into the pits, but while Verstappen, Hamilton and Alonso took on softs. Norris went for hard, setting up an intriguing tyre offset for their final stint. Leclerc also stopped for a second time to bolt on mediums. As the order filtered through after those stops, Verstappen on the softs held P1 from Norris on the hards, with Hamilton on the softs jumping Piastri, who was on the hards, for third. Russell on the mediums holding fifth and lamenting a missed opportunity over the radio. Alonso on the softs in sixth, Sainz on the hards, Perez on the softs and Albon on the softs, and Leclerc on the mediums rounding out the top 10. Wonderful, hurt, Norris sarcastically commented when his engineer informed him of the tyres the cars around him were running, given that only 15 laps remained. The safety car still circulating and both McLarens were on the hardest tyres. At the end of lap 38, the safety car peeled into the pits and released a pack of cars into green flag conditions once again. Verstappen mastering the restart on softer rubber to hold the lead from Norris and Hamilton, who looked lively and ready to attack his fellow Brit. What followed was a thrilling multi-lap exchange between the younger and the seven-time world champion, Norris making his McLaren as wide as possible on several occasions as his tyres came up to temperature to keep the Mercedes behind. That McLaren is so quick on those hards. Impressive, Russell commented from P5 behind the other chrome-liveried MCL60 of Piastri, with Alonso, Sainz, Perez, Albon and Leclerc still holding on to the final points-paying positions. Meanwhile, Gasly jumped on the radio to demand that Stroll return P11 to him after a move around the outside at Stowe. Up front, Verstappen commented that his soft tyres were not feeling that good, but his times were still several times quicker than Norris, while teammate Perez sparked a demise for Sainz with a move at club. Albon and Leclerc swiftly following him through. With the stewards taking no action over Stroll's initial bold pass on Gasly, the pair will clash again after battling Sainz for the final point, making contact into club and leaving the Alpine with apparent suspension damage, forcing him into retirement. This time Stroll was given a 5-second penalty for his actions. Perez's charge continued with a pass on Alonso into Stowe for P6, while Albon, Leclerc and Sainz brought back memories of previous eras as Williams, celebrating their 800th Grand Prix, went toe-to-toe with Ferrari on merit. As the final laps ticked down, Verstappen continued to stretch out his lead over Norris, eventually crossing the line just under 4 seconds clear to bag his 8th win of the season, with Hamilton finishing 3 seconds further back to make it 2 Brits on the podium. Piastri took a fine 4th in the other McLaren despite the opportunity of a podium going begging, followed by Russell, Perez and Alonso, with Albon, Leclerc and Sainz scoring the final points of the day after their squabble. Sargent almost made it a double points finish for Williams in 11th, followed by Bottas and Hülkenberg, who recovered from their respective qualifying and early race troubles, with a penalised Stroll ending up 14th. Shaw was 15th after a third swap to softs under the safety car, with Tsunoda and De Vries the last drivers to cross the line in 16th and 17th respectively. Gasly 6 laps down after his incident with Stroll, and Magnussen and Ocon the 2 DNFs. So Verstappen said after the race, of course, very happy that we won again. He now leads Perez by 99 points in the drivers' standings. And then he said, 11 wins in a row for the team. I think that's pretty incredible, but it wasn't straightforward today. I was doing a bit of drifting on Thursday with marketing, and I felt like I was doing that also in the start, which wasn't very good. It was very bad. We'll look into that because I think the last few starts were actually a lot better, and today wasn't that great. But at least I made it a bit more exciting. I had to push for it. Lando didn't really put up a fight. He was very nice to me, but then he eventually came back again in the DRS, so he had a lot of pace today. He did very well. The next stop on the 2023 F1 calendar will be the Hungaroring in Budapest for the Hungarian Grand Prix, which takes place from the 21st to the 23rd of July. So that is it for this video today. Thank you all so much for watching. Please like, share and subscribe to the channel if you are new around here. Dugout Daily the Football channel, hit the Apex the F1 channel, and at MCFC Hips on Twitter. Everybody, thank you all so much for watching, and we'll speak to you all soon. Take care and goodbye for now.